You get that tattoo from a vending machine, old man? The laughter came fast, sharp, and far louder than it needed to be. It rolled across the bright concrete courtyard outside the Naval Special Warfare Training Center, drawing glances from recruits, instructors, and visitors alike. The afternoon sun hung high over Coronado, baking the pavement and turning the distant air above the training grounds into a shimmering haze. Seated alone on a weathered wooden bench near the base memorial, Samuel Walker slowly lifted his eyes from the harbor beyond the fence. He was 82 years old, white-haired, broad-shouldered despite his age, and dressed in a faded gray button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled neatly above his forearms. The recruit who had spoken stood with 3 friends beside him, fresh uniforms pressed crisp, confidence overflowing from men who had not yet learned how much they did not know. Recruit Ethan Brooks smirked and pointed directly at the faded tattoo on Samuel's left forearm. It was little more than a dark circle now, blurred by decades of sun and time. Inside the circle rested a strange symbol none of them recognized. "Seriously," Ethan said, glancing at his buddies. "Looks like something a kid would draw in a notebook." More laughter followed. Samuel said nothing. The silence irritated Ethan even more. He had expected anger, maybe embarrassment, anything that would prove he had control of the moment. Instead, the old man simply watched him with calm blue eyes that seemed untouched by the noise around him. Nearby, a flag snapped in the ocean breeze. The distant hum of helicopters drifted over the bay. A few recruits slowed their pace, sensing tension. Others pulled out their phones. Ethan stepped closer. "Let me guess. You were some secret operator nobody ever heard of." His friends laughed again. One of them raised a phone and started recording. Samuel remained motionless. His hands rested comfortably on the handle of an old canvas bag beside the bench. The reaction, or lack of one, only fueled the performance. Ethan turned toward the growing audience. "Guys, I think we found the founder of Navy SEALs." The crowd chuckled. A few exchanged uneasy looks. The joke should have been funny. Somehow it wasn't. There was something about the old man that felt out of place. Not weak, not confused, simply unmoved, like a lighthouse standing through a storm. Ethan noticed it too, though he could not explain why. The recruit folded his arms and leaned forward. "Come on, old-timer. What does the tattoo mean?" For the first time, Samuel shifted his gaze toward the symbol on his arm. The movement was subtle, but something changed in his expression. Not anger, not fear. Something deeper, older, like a memory brushing against a door long kept closed. The ocean wind stirred again, carrying the scent of salt across the courtyard. Around them, conversations faded. Even the recruits holding phones lowered them slightly. Samuel studied the faded ink for a long moment before looking back at Ethan. His voice, when it finally came, was quiet enough that everyone nearby leaned in to hear it. "It means exactly what it's supposed to mean." Ethan laughed immediately, relieved to hear something he could mock. The crowd laughed with him, but Samuel Walker was no longer listening. His eyes had drifted somewhere far beyond the training center, beyond the harbor, beyond the years themselves. And for reasons none of the recruits could understand, the sound of their laughter suddenly felt very small. The laughter lingered for a few more seconds before the crowd slowly began to break apart, but not completely. Curiosity had replaced amusement. Recruits who had been heading toward afternoon drills found reasons to slow down. Others remained near the memorial plaza, pretending to check their phones while keeping one eye on the old man sitting beneath the fluttering flag. The Pacific breeze swept through the courtyard again, carrying the distant cries of gulls from the harbor. Samuel Walker remained exactly where he was. Calm, patient, almost as if the entire exchange had never happened. Ethan Brooks hated that. He had spent most of his life learning how to command attention. Back in high school, on sports teams, during training. A joke usually landed. A challenge usually worked. Yet somehow this quiet old man sitting on a weathered bench had taken control of the moment simply by refusing to play along. Ethan glanced at his friends. "Did you hear that answer?" he said. "It means exactly what it is supposed to mean." "What does that even mean?" His friends chuckled. One shrugged. Another zoomed in on the tattoo with his phone camera. The faded symbol looked even stranger up close. A dark circle. Inside it, several sharp lines intersected in a pattern none of them recognized. It did not resemble any modern Navy insignia. It was not a SEAL trident. It was not a unit patch. It was not anything they had seen in training manuals or military history displays. That only made it easier to mock. Probably made it up himself, one recruit said. Maybe it is from some biker club. More laughter followed. Samuel did not react. His attention had drifted toward the harbor. Beyond the fence, sunlight danced across the water in silver flashes. A destroyer sat anchored in the distance, motionless against the horizon. The old veteran watched it quietly. Ethan followed his gaze and shook his head. "You know what I think," he said. "I think he wants people to ask about it." That earned another round of agreement. Nearby, a handful of instructors exchanged glances but said nothing. The situation had not crossed any official line. Not yet. Standing near the entrance to the memorial walkway, Petty Officer Ryan Cole had witnessed the entire exchange from the beginning. He was not smiling. Something about the tattoo bothered him. Not because he recognized it. He did not. The problem was that he almost recognized it. The feeling sat in the back of his mind like a forgotten memory, refusing to surface. Cole watched Samuel carefully. The old man's posture was wrong for a tourist. Wrong for a retiree visiting the base. Even his silence felt different. Most people being mocked either shrank away or pushed back. Samuel had done neither. He simply absorbed it, the way an old stone seawall absorbs waves. Cole looked back toward the tattoo. The faded lines stirred a faint memory from years earlier. A briefing room. A photograph flashed briefly on a projector screen. An instructor immediately moving past it without explanation. The memory vanished before he could grab hold of it. Across the courtyard, Ethan stepped forward again, determined to squeeze one more reaction from the old veteran. But before he could speak, Samuel slowly stood. The movement was deliberate, unhurried. He lifted the worn canvas bag from beside the bench and rested it against his shoulder. Then, without looking at any of the recruits, he began walking toward the memorial pathway. The crowd instinctively parted to let him pass. No one understood why, least of all Ethan Brooks. Samuel Walker moved slowly along the memorial pathway, the worn canvas bag resting against his shoulder as the afternoon sunlight stretched long shadows across the concrete. The polished stone markers lining the walkway reflected flashes of gold from the lowering sun, and the steady ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and distant diesel from ships anchored in the harbor. Behind him, the crowd gradually dispersed, but not entirely. Curiosity had taken root. Ethan Brooks watched the old veteran continue forward and felt an unfamiliar irritation settle into his chest. He could not explain it. The man had not argued. He had not defended himself. He had not even seemed offended. Somehow that felt worse than any comeback. "He is acting like he owns the place," Ethan muttered. One of his friends shrugged. "Maybe he comes here all the time." Ethan shook his head. "Nobody walks around here looking that comfortable unless they want attention." The words sounded convincing enough to the others, but not to Petty Officer Ryan Cole. Standing near the memorial entrance, Cole continued studying the old man's retreating figure. Every instinct developed during years in uniform was telling him something did not fit. The tattoo was part of it. The calm was part of it. But there was something else. Samuel Walker moved through the space the way seasoned military personnel often did. Not with arrogance. Not with authority. With familiarity. As if every sound around him had already been heard 1,000 times before. Cole finally pulled out his phone. He zoomed in on one of the photographs taken earlier by a recruit and found a clear image of the tattoo. The faded circle. The strange symbol hidden inside it. He stared at it for several seconds. The image tugged at a memory that remained frustratingly out of reach. Somewhere he had seen something similar. Somewhere in a briefing. A report. An archive. He could not place it. Across the pathway, Samuel stopped beside a stone monument overlooking the bay. The memorial was simple. No dramatic sculpture. No towering display. Just polished granite engraved with names that had long since become part of military history. Samuel removed his cap and stood quietly before it. The breeze stirred his white hair. His expression softened slightly. For a brief moment, the years seemed to fall away from him. He was not looking at stone. He was looking through it. Looking beyond it. Looking toward people nobody else could see. The sounds of the training center faded into the background. Recruits jogging in formation. Instructors calling commands. Helicopters moving somewhere beyond the horizon. Samuel remained motionless. Ethan noticed the scene from a distance and rolled his eyes. Now he is putting on a show. Yet even as he said it, his voice carried less confidence than before. Nearby, Ryan Cole finally made a decision. He opened a secure military contact directory and selected a former instructor now assigned to historical operations records. Attaching the image, he typed a short message. "Have you ever seen this symbol before?" The reply did not come immediately. Minutes passed. The sun dipped lower. Samuel remained by the monument. Then Cole's phone vibrated. He opened the response expecting a simple answer. Instead, he felt the color drain from his face. The message contained only 6 words. "Where did you get this photo?" Ryan Cole stared at the message on his screen as the afternoon light faded into a deeper shade of gold. The 6 words seemed almost absurd in their simplicity, yet the urgency behind them was unmistakable. "Where did you get this photo?" He typed a quick reply, attaching the location and a brief explanation. The response came back less than 30 seconds later. "Call me. Now." A chill ran through him despite the warm coastal air. Across the Memorial Plaza, Samuel Walker remained standing before the granite monument, motionless except for the occasional flutter of his shirt in the ocean breeze. He looked less like a visitor and more like part of the memorial itself. Timeless, silent, untouched by the noise around him. Ryan stepped away from the crowd and moved toward a quieter section of the walkway. He pressed the call button. The line connected immediately. "Ryan, listen carefully," the voice said without introduction. It belonged to Commander Eric Lawson, a retired operations historian who had spent years cataloging records few people even knew existed. His normally calm tone had vanished. "Tell me exactly where that man is." Ryan glanced back toward Samuel. "Coronado, Naval Special Warfare Training Center." Silence filled the line for several seconds. Then came a slow exhale. "Do not approach him." Ryan frowned. "Why?" Another pause followed. "Because if that symbol is what I think it is, you are standing near something that should not exist." Before Ryan could ask another question, his attention drifted toward Samuel. The old veteran had lowered his gaze toward the faded tattoo on his forearm. The late afternoon sunlight touched the weathered ink, illuminating the dark circle for a brief moment. And suddenly, somewhere far behind those calm blue eyes, a door opened. The harbor disappeared. The warm California breeze vanished. The bright stone walkway dissolved into darkness and rain. Decades earlier, cold water hammered against a steel deck beneath a moonless sky. Wind howled across a restless sea. 5 exhausted men sat shoulder to shoulder beneath a dim red light, their faces hidden beneath soaked hoods and shadows. No one spoke. They did not need to. Outside, waves crashed endlessly against the hull. Inside, silence carried its own weight. One of the younger men held a small piece of metal no larger than a silver dollar. Another carefully traced a symbol onto a folded map. A circle, lines crossing through the center. Simple, unremarkable, meaningless to anyone else. The oldest among them looked around the compartment and finally nodded. One by one, the others returned the gesture. No ceremony, no speech, no grand declaration, just understanding. The symbol was never meant to represent rank. It was never meant to appear in records. It existed for one reason only, so the survivors would always know who had been there. A promise, a memory, a bond carried forward when everything else was left behind. The image flickered like distant lightning. Then it was gone. Samuel blinked once. The Memorial Plaza returned. The ocean breeze returned. The sounds of the base returned. Yet something had changed. Ryan could see it even from a distance. The old veteran's expression remained calm, but the weight behind it felt heavier now. Meanwhile, Ethan Brooks had been watching from across the courtyard. Curiosity was beginning to overpower arrogance. He looked at the tattoo again and for the first time wondered whether everyone had been laughing at the wrong thing. The sun hung lower over Coronado, turning the harbor into a sheet of molten gold. Long shadows stretched across the Memorial Plaza, and the steady rhythm of activity around the training center continued as if nothing unusual had happened. Yet beneath the surface, something had shifted. Ryan Cole felt it. Ethan Brooks felt it. Even the recruits who had laughed earlier seemed less certain now. Samuel Walker remained near the monument, his weathered hand resting lightly against the strap of his canvas bag. He looked toward the water, silent and composed, while conversations around him gradually faded into whispers. Ethan stared across the plaza. The image of the tattoo refused to leave his mind. The confidence he had worn all afternoon was beginning to crack. Not because he suddenly respected the old man, Not yet. Because uncertainty was replacing certainty. And uncertainty made people uncomfortable. One of his friends nudged him with an elbow. You are not actually buying into this mystery act, are you? Ethan forced a laugh. Of course not. But the answer sounded weaker than he intended. The recruit holding the phone stepped closer. Let us get a better picture. Before anyone could object, he raised the camera and zoomed towards Samuel's arm. The image sharpened. The faded circle. The strange intersecting lines. Decades of wear. Decades of sun. The symbol looked less like a tattoo and more like something carved out of memory itself. Ethan frowned. I still do not recognize it. Neither does anybody else, another recruit replied. Exactly. Ethan started walking towards Samuel again. The others followed. Across the plaza, Ryan immediately noticed. His jaw tightened. Whatever this symbol represented, he was becoming increasingly certain that it was not something these recruits should be turning into entertainment. He slipped his phone into his pocket and began moving in the same direction. The distance closed quickly. Samuel heard the approaching footsteps before anyone spoke. He did not turn around. He simply continued looking out across the harbor where a patrol vessel was slowly cutting through the evening water. Hey, Ethan called out. One more question. Samuel remained silent. The recruit forced a smile. You keep saying the tattoo means what it is supposed to mean. So what exactly is it supposed to mean? No response came. The wind rustled the nearby flags. Somewhere in the distance, a helicopter crossed the horizon. Ethan felt dozens of eyes watching. He could still walk away. Instead, pride pushed him forward. Or maybe you do not know either. A few nervous laughs emerged from behind him. Then Ethan made a mistake. He stepped closer and reached toward the faded symbol, intending nothing more than a dismissive gesture. Before his hand could touch it, another voice cut through the plaza. Do not. The word was calm, firm. Ryan Cole had arrived. Every recruit turned toward him. The petty officer rarely raised his voice. He did not need to. Ethan lowered his hand. We are just talking. Ryan held his gaze. Then keep it that way. An uneasy silence followed. Samuel finally turned. For the first time all afternoon, he looked directly at Ryan. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Not recognition. Not yet. But understanding. Ryan could feel it. At that exact moment, his phone vibrated again. He pulled it out and looked at the screen. The new message contained only a single sentence. The sender was Commander Eric Lawson. The words made Ryan's heartbeat stop for a moment. Do whatever it takes to keep him there. Someone important is already on the way. Ryan Cole stared at the message while the evening sun settled lower over the harbor. Do whatever it takes to keep him there. Someone important is already on the way. The words carried none of the explanation he wanted, yet somehow they felt heavier than a full page of orders. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and looked towards Samuel Walker. The old veteran had returned his attention to the water. Calm, patient, unhurried. Whatever was happening seemed completely unsurprising to him. Around the plaza, the atmosphere had changed. The recruits could feel it even if they did not understand it. The joking had faded. The confidence had faded. In its place was a growing tension that moved through the crowd like an approaching storm still hidden beyond the horizon. Ethan Brooks folded his arms and watched Ryan carefully. Who is coming? He asked. Ryan ignored the question. How long have you been standing here, sir? Samuel glanced toward him. Long enough. The answer was simple. Ryan nodded as though it carried meaning only he could hear. Ethan exchanged a look with his friends. None of this made sense anymore. What started as harmless teasing now felt strangely serious. Across the bay, the distant silhouette of a helicopter appeared against the orange sky before disappearing behind a ridge. The sound arrived seconds later, a faint rhythmic pulse rolling over the water. Samuel's eyes briefly followed the horizon. Then something unexpected happened. Ryan's phone vibrated again. Another message. This time there was an attachment. A photograph. He opened it and immediately stopped breathing for a second. The image was old, grainy, faded by decades. 5 men stood together near a coastline beneath overcast skies. Their faces were partially obscured. Their uniforms carried no identifying insignia, no visible names, no unit markings. Yet one detail stood out instantly. On the forearm of one man was the same symbol, the same circle, the same intersecting lines. Ryan zoomed closer. His pulse quickened. Attached beneath the image was a single sentence. Archive designation restricted. Original record sealed. Ryan looked up slowly. Samuel was still standing exactly where he had been. The realization hit him with unsettling force. This was not a random veteran. This was not a tourist. This was someone connected to a piece of history that had practically vanished. Nearby, Ethan noticed Ryan's expression. "What is it?" he asked. No answer came. "Petty officer, what is going on?" Ryan carefully locked the phone screen. "Nothing you need to worry about." The response only made Ethan more curious. Around them, several instructors had begun arriving near the Memorial Plaza. Not enough to draw attention, just enough to notice. They stood quietly, watching, waiting. The harbor wind strengthened. Flags snapped sharply overhead. Samuel adjusted the strap of his canvas bag and glanced toward the parking area beyond the training center entrance. A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. It lasted less than a second. Ryan saw it. The old veteran was not surprised. He was expecting someone. Then another message appeared on Ryan's phone. This one came from Commander Eric Lawson directly. No greeting. No explanation. Only 4 words. "He knows we found him." The last rays of sunlight stretched across the Memorial Plaza as the evening sky deepened into shades of amber and blue. A strange stillness had settled over the training center. Not silence. The sounds were still there. Distant engines. Boots on concrete. Flags snapping in the coastal wind. Yet everything seemed muted, as if the base itself were waiting. Ryan Cole read the message again. "He knows we found him." For simple words. For words that somehow explained the faint smile he had seen on Samuel Walker's face moments earlier. The old veteran was not confused. He was not lost. He had known from the beginning that eventually someone would recognize the symbol. Across the plaza, Samuel stood beside the monument with his hands resting lightly on the canvas bag. His eyes remained fixed on the harbor. The fading sunlight reflected across the water, and for a moment the years seemed to blur together. The present drifted away. Cold wind replaced warm ocean air. Darkness replaced the California sunset. A lonely shoreline emerged from memory. Decades earlier, 5 figures stood facing a gray horizon beneath a sky heavy with clouds. No crowds. No cameras. No ceremonies. Their uniforms carried no names. Their mission would never appear in any public history book. One man unfolded a small map. Another checked a compass. The youngest among them stared out at the water and asked a question nobody answered. Not because they did not know the answer. Because some things were better left unsaid. The symbol was drawn that day. Not by order. Not by regulation. A simple mark shared among 5 men who understood exactly what it represented. Trust. Duty. Memory. The image faded. Samuel blinked once. The harbor returned. The monument returned. The years returned. Nearby, Ethan Brooks watched the old veteran carefully. The arrogance that had driven him all afternoon had nearly vanished. In its place was uncertainty. He glanced toward Ryan, then toward the instructors gathering near the edges of the plaza, then back toward Samuel. More people were arriving now. Quietly, subtly. Nobody announced their presence. Nobody explained why they were there. Yet the crowd was growing. A senior chief appeared near the memorial entrance. 2 officers arrived moments later. Neither spoke. Both looked directly toward Samuel. Ethan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Something important was happening. Something far beyond him. Ryan's phone vibrated one final time. He looked down. The message came from a number he did not recognize. There was no greeting. No signature. Only a single sentence. Arrival in 3 minutes. Ryan slowly lowered the phone. At that exact moment, the distant sound of an approaching vehicle drifted across the base. Heads turned instinctively. The vehicle moved through the main gate without stopping. No inspection. No delay. It traveled directly toward the Memorial Plaza. Samuel finally shifted his posture. Not much. Just enough to reveal that he had been expecting this moment all along. The vehicle rounded the corner and entered view. Conversations stopped. Instructors straightened. Officers exchanged silent looks. Even the wind seemed to pause. Ethan stared at the approaching vehicle and felt his pulse quicken. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The old man standing beside the monument was not who he had assumed he was. The vehicle rolled to a smooth stop at the edge of the Memorial Plaza. No sirens. No dramatic arrival. Yet the effect was immediate. Conversations died. Recruits stopped moving. Even the instructors standing near the walkway straightened almost instinctively. The driver's door opened first. A uniformed aide stepped out and moved aside. Then the rear door opened. Commander Nathan Cross emerged. The evening sunlight caught the gold insignia on his uniform as he stepped onto the pavement. He was not a man easily surprised. Years of leadership had carved patience and discipline into every movement. Yet the moment his eyes found Samuel Walker, something changed. Ethan Brooks saw it happen. The commander stopped walking. Just for a second. A single heartbeat. Then he continued forward. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Purposefully. The crowd parted without being asked. No one wanted to stand in his path. Ryan Cole watched closely. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The answer to the mystery that had consumed the entire afternoon. Commander Cross crossed the plaza without acknowledging the officers who stood nearby. He ignored the instructors. He ignored the recruits. His attention never left Samuel. The old veteran remained beside the monument, one hand resting on the strap of his canvas bag. Calm. Silent. Waiting. 20 feet separated them. Then 15. Then 10. Ethan felt his pulse hammering inside his chest. The recruits beside him exchanged nervous glances. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody spoke. The harbor breeze swept across the memorial, carrying the scent of salt water through the gathering silence. 5 feet. Commander Cross finally stopped. For a long moment, neither man spoke. They simply looked at one another. The commander studied the weathered face before him. The faded tattoo. The quiet eyes. The years. Samuel returned the gaze without the slightest hint of discomfort. Then something happened that none of the recruits would ever forget. Commander Cross came to full attention. The movement was sharp, precise, absolute. A fraction of a second later, he raised his hand in a formal salute. Gasps spread through the crowd. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. Ryan closed his eyes briefly, as if confirming something he already knew. Around the plaza, officers immediately straightened. Instructors followed. Several senior personnel instinctively mirrored the gesture. The silence became almost physical. Samuel looked at the commander for several seconds before slowly returning the salute. The two men held it for a brief moment beneath the fading California sky. No speeches, no announcements, no explanations, just respect. When the salute ended, Commander Cross lowered his hand and spoke quietly. Yet every word seemed to carry across the entire memorial. "Sir, it is an honor to finally meet you." Samuel offered the faintest smile. "You already have." Confusion rippled through the crowd. The commander nodded as though the answer made perfect sense. His expression softened. "You are right," he said. "I just did not know it at the time." Ethan stared at the scene, unable to process what he was seeing. The man they had mocked all afternoon was standing face to face with one of the most respected leaders on the base. And somehow the commander was treating him as if he were standing before a legend. The silence lingered long after the salute ended. No one seemed willing to break it. The Memorial Plaza, so full of noise only an hour earlier, now felt transformed. The recruits stood motionless. The instructors remained at attention. Even the harbor beyond the fence seemed calmer beneath the fading light of evening. Ethan Brooks could not take his eyes off Samuel Walker. Every assumption he had made throughout the day had collapsed. The old man was not pretending. He was not seeking attention. He had never asked for recognition. Yet somehow he had received more respect in a single moment than most people earned in a lifetime. Commander Nathan Cross lowered his hand and looked briefly toward the gathered crowd. His gaze settled on the recruits. "Most of you have never seen that symbol before," he said. His voice was calm, but it carried easily across the plaza. No one answered. No one needed to. You were not supposed to. The words deepened the silence. Cross turned back toward Samuel. For a moment, the commander seemed less like a senior officer and more like a student standing before a teacher. "There are stories in this profession that never make it into books," he continued. "Not because they are forgotten, because some people chose service over recognition." Samuel offered a faint smile, the same quiet smile he had worn all afternoon. The commander nodded toward the faded tattoo. "That symbol belonged to 5 men. He paused. "Only one remains." No dramatic reaction followed. No applause. No gasp. The truth landed with far more weight because of its simplicity. Ryan Cole watched the recruits absorb the meaning. He could almost see the lesson taking shape behind their eyes. Across the plaza, Ethan slowly stepped forward. The confidence that had fueled his mockery was gone. In its place stood humility. "Sir," he said quietly. Samuel looked toward him. Ethan swallowed hard. I am sorry. The words were simple, honest. Samuel studied the young recruit for a moment before giving a small nod. Nothing more was needed. No lecture. No punishment. No embarrassment. Just acknowledgement. The harbor breeze swept across the memorial once more. Somewhere beyond the base, the first evening lights began appearing along the coastline. Samuel adjusted the strap of his old canvas bag and glanced toward the water one final time. Then he turned and began walking toward the exit. The crowd instinctively moved aside. Nobody stopped him. Nobody asked for photographs. Nobody demanded more stories. They simply watched him go. Commander Cross remained standing beside the monument until the old veteran disappeared beyond the pathway. Only then did he lower his gaze. Ethan continued staring at the empty walkway long after Samuel was gone. The tattoo, the silence, the salute. He knew he would remember all of it for the rest of his life. Around him, the base slowly returned to normal. Conversations resumed. Orders were given. Training schedules continued. Yet something had changed. Not in Samuel Walker. He had never needed to change. The change had happened in everyone else. And as the last light faded beyond the harbor, a quiet truth settled over the memorial plaza. Some symbols were never meant to impress people. They were meant to remind them. Respect is not earned by being noticed. Sometimes it is earned by a lifetime of service that speaks for itself.